name is Ben Baldwin, and I'm hosting this series for David and Vint. I started the series because I think we should be sharing and helping each other. This isn't my J job, however. Just as a quick intro, I'm the founder of a company called Scale Driver, which is a system that better predicts innovation success and speeds it up. And I like live video because not only is it innovation, but it's a great way to introduce ourselves to the group and share what we're working on in a pretty informal way, and allows us to ask for help both ways. So the video technology, just as ground rules, lets everybody interact in real time. So I started out by putting everybody on mute, and then all I request is that when you have a question, please just introduce yourself to Jim and Esther, and then also the audience, so that they and the audience know who you are. And when I say audience, I mean this is an interactive video and the link is open. So we're recording it, and other people who may not know who's speaking may enter this video session. So with that, the other feature is the chat room on the side, or the chat block. If you have any questions, you can text the group or just text me. So with that, I'll just get out of the way and turn it over to Jim and Esther.
Great, thank you, Ben. I think probably Esther should start, because most of you are over in her home turf. I'm just lonely here in London. Esther and I have been talking for some time, well over a year now, and we've occasionally done some joint chats. So this is one of those. But the person with the credibility of having written the book is Esther. So I'm going to hand over to you to really kick us off.
Thank you, Jim. It's actually always a pleasure to be with Jim. We have had some pretty interesting talks, and we're hoping to do some more. So basically, what we're trying to do is nothing small. We're trying to change what people think of as education and what the whole system should look like. We've been trying to change education for a long time, and it hasn't really worked. And I think one of the number one blocks is really the mindset of the teacher. So everybody talks about the mindset of the student. And Carol Dweck talks about the mindset of the student and how that impacts student progress. But in fact, it really is the mindset of the teacher that impacts the entire classroom. And every single kid in that class is being impacted by what that teacher thinks about the expectations for that class. And they don't have to be verbal. That's the thing that's kind of difficult for teachers. You know, kids get it. They know what you think without you having to say what you think. You know, they can sense your warmth, they can sense your enthusiasm and passion, and they can sense whether or not you think they are going to be able to do it. So I think one of the things we really need to talk about is how we can change the mindset of the teacher and how that teacher can feel good about changing the way that they've been instructing for the last, I think it's 100 years.
Esther, what's wrong with it at the moment? You know, we've broadly speaking had this education system for 65, 70 years since the end of the war. Hasn't changed much in my country, hasn't changed too much in yours, I guess.
Nope, hasn't changed.
Why not stick with what works?
Yes, well, it does work. It works really well for the factory model. That's the problem. It works really well for training people to follow instructions and to perform on multiple choice tests and to memorize information. But it doesn't work really well when you want people to actually be able to think clearly, collaborate, and have some critical thinking involved. That's the number one problem. And so in order to do that, we really need to change the way that we're teaching. Now, not 100% of the time. We both have this idea, or at least I have this idea.
And incidentally, Esther, last week in London, we had the Education World Forum, which is the world's biggest gathering of education ministers. And we had something like 80 from around the world here in London. And Andrew Schleicher, the head of education at OECD, came and joined them. And he reminded us that the English-speaking world is the part of the world that has the most rote learning, that incidentally England is the world capital of rote learning, far more so than the Asian cultures that we associate more with rote learning. So far more so than Korea or Singapore or Shanghai, who are currently, if you believe the PISA tests, which are controversial, those Asian countries are certainly outperforming the English-speaking world in terms of their school performance. And they, rather than rote learning, tend to focus more on deeper mastery-based learning with a narrower curriculum. Andrews's analysis is that we try and cover in a shallow way huge breadth of curriculum in our jurisdictions, and that doesn't really equip anyone for anything other than content recall in exams, and that's not really fit for this century.
Yes, I think that's 100% true. I'm glad to hear that Andreas was there and talked about this, especially since he's kind of in charge of the PISA test.
Yep.
And so one of the things that I talked to Andreas about a couple of years ago was what he could do with that PISA test to try to encourage more students in countries to have more of the project-based learning. And he said he was going to think about it, and so far I haven't not seen the results of this, but he is aware that it is a problem, and that that it should be, there has to be some way to encourage countries. But it's interesting to hear that the Asian countries are more project-based, and
they're more mastery-based.
Mastery-based.
So for them, they've got the gain of teachers having to focus on less stuff, having more time to prepare, and that as they teach, because of the mastery model, they're always referring back to the foundations of the learning. So you then never have to revise in order to sit a test, because the learning is still current, because you haven't got just these swathes of content that you have to memorize.
That's right. So the mastery base is basically it. It really is mastery. So that's what I've been doing in my classes for the last 25 years. Students don't get a grade on an essay that they write. They just have to revise it and continue to revise it until it's an A. So there's no grade pressure. It's just people are at different levels because they learn differently. But in fact, you can get an A pretty easily. All you have to do is revise. And it is mastery. And it should be the same way in math and in science and so forth. And that encourages students to learn, because the number one discouraging thing for most students is a bad grade. If you get a D on something and it affects your average, then you lose enthusiasm for actually working in the class. And I discovered this a long time ago. So I'm glad, that's, I guess, the main thing that is going on in the Asian world. And more of that should be going on. There is a company called Mastery Connect that is trying to promote this with the grading systems that they offer. And it hasn't taken off in America yet, I can tell you. We're still targeting that SAT exam.
Certainly we have quite a lot going on around mastery maths, where we're trying to build on the expertise of Singapore and Shanghai and bring more of it here. And some people say it's not dissimilar from how maths was taught here 50 years ago, but that's part of a fairly tedious debate. The other thing that I would add, Esther, is every country in the world pretty much signed up to the Sustainable Development Goals for 2030, and Goal 4 is around quality education. It is clear that in order to achieve that goal, just for primary education alone, we'd have to find another 7 million teachers around the world. And there's a lot of evidence that the current luxury model that we have in the English-speaking world of small class sizes, highly trained expert teachers, is just not scalable. It's just not going to meet the demand for schooling that there is in the world, and that we may struggle to get off our addiction of rote learning and our addiction for that luxury form of schooling. And the innovation may well come from Latin America, Asia, or even Africa, around how you scale high quality education using a combination of artificial intelligence, more, to some extent, casual teaching labor. So you might use someone's expertise for 3 or 4 hours a day connected into a classroom, and then a trained teacher or teaching assistant in the classroom can then manage how that content is then used. But there's some notions that there's elements of innovation there that will come through probably in surprising parts of the world rather than those that we associate with educational excellence.
Well, probably because they're not so controlled by the test.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, the number one block in American educational system, and probably in European too, is the test. Everybody's trying to pass that test.
Yeah.
And I actually just had a conversation with my students yesterday about why they aren't paying attention to the news, because, you know, the news is pretty challenging for everybody. And they're worried about, let me tell you what they're worried about. They're worried about their test scores in their AP classes. And
Yeah.
they said to me, they don't have time to follow the news because they're really concerned about getting an A in their AP class. So as long as this is continuing to control the way that people behave and students behave and teachers behave, we're not going to make any progress.
For sure. And that's why we have to move this on, that it doesn't fit the needs of individuals growing up to have to change careers many times in very long working lives now. It doesn't meet the needs of the employers who identify all those skills gaps, particularly as we close down borders and retreat from globalization. Those skills gaps will become heightened for us. The current model is unsustainable in terms of the numbers of teachers that are required, and so we have to try and make a shift, and that's where your notion in your book comes in.
Right. Well, my book is basically kids learn a lot from their phones and from places like the Khan Academy and, you know, Udacity and things like that. And this smart teacher, actually, I'm not saying the other teachers aren't smart, but I'm just saying that it would be helpful for all the teachers if they could learn to use these tools to support what they're trying to do, and also to use peer learning. So my classes tend to run 70 students, and teachers are like horrified. It's like 70? How does it work? And it's because I'm using a lot of tech to support me, and there's a lot of peer interaction. And the projects that I do are related to the real world. So the kids actually, they want to learn because they see the relevance of what they're doing. So all three of those things make a huge difference.
That's the big untapped resource in education, and Mark's written so and talked so much about the power of the learner themselves. But you know, there's a latent teacher in every learner. If only we would empower them and make them believe in their own genius.
Right. Well, if they, you know, I should show videos of my kids teaching each other, which is really effective. And not only that, then they tend to win the top of the nation. So it works really well. So Mark he wrote a book, which is a great book about, you know, using actually what's going on in your community. There's a lot of things going on in your community that kids could help with. And getting kids involved with the community and having them be involved in projects in the community as a way for them to learn is effective. And most schools, they cut themselves off from the community instead of inviting the community in to help. And so it would be great if all schools would somehow get this on their agenda so that they could meet with the city council, for example, and then get some of those kids involved in anything that's going on in the community. I mean, my kids are involved in the community, and it's through the journalism. So they're constantly commenting on the community and what's going on, and they've made some significant impacts on that community. But there's other ways to do it. And Mark's book is full of these ideas, by the way.
Yeah, and I also spent the last couple of weeks, big chunks of it with Angela Myers, who's over from the States, who her Choose to Matter movement is about building that sense of empowerment amongst young people to then do something with it, and to do something with adults as peers, not sort of break down that adult-child relationship and really.
Well, so what you just said is the key, and it's very tough for a lot of teachers to do. Treat the kids as peers. Give them some respect. I mean, if you can do that, it's amazing what they will do. And I mean, if you expect them to behave in some sort of juvenile, terrible way, you know, without saying anything, I can tell you they're going to just sense it and do that.
So where do we start? You know, we've agreed we need to change. We've agreed we want more project-based learning. We want more child empowerment, more peer learning, more peer instruction. Where do we start?
Well, first off, I think it's really important to change the mindset of the community. You know, nothing can really happen without support from that community, because the schools really are institutions that are doing something that the community set them up to do. So parents need to really understand that kids, by working on projects that are real world, can actually learn the skills instead of just doing those PDF worksheets all the time.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, it's kind of like, it's kind of a crazy example, but it really works. You know, if you thought that you could somehow learn to swim, you know, by reading a book about it or by watching the Olympics. Okay, kids, every day now, I want you to watch the Olympics and read a book about it. And then you can just jump in the pool when you're, you know, and start swimming like that. You know, we're expecting kids to learn a lot of things and then they don't actually do it. They just talk about it or read about it.
Yeah.
And so, right. So if they can actually do it.
People playing championship manager in the as a game in soccer, and then applying for real manager jobs on the basis that they've taken some tiny club all the way to the top, and then it turns out obviously that was just their virtual world. Grounding things in reality is completely true, and to some extent I like to talk now about reality-based learning rather than project-based learning.
Yeah, actually reality-based learning, that's a good term, because I think project-based learning got a bad rap in the 80s.
Yeah.
And so reality-based learning might be a good way to put it, so and people could understand it perhaps more effectively. So getting back to how do we start doing this, I think we need to have a campaign where we can, with some people whose names are well respected, about what it really takes to train your child to be an entrepreneur or successful in the 21st century. Mm-hmm. And then perhaps people will listen to it and then make those changes in their communities. Because in America, you know, there's, I don't know how many 100,000 school boards, and, you know, every state has its own thing. And, you know, it's just kind of making changes in this country is really tough. Because
14
the same in England, the same all over the world, actually.
Yeah. So a bottom-up campaign, bottom-up movement.
Yes.
Around reality-based learning, with time-poor teachers, persuading them to do what?
Persuading them that if they give kids more control and have more peer learning, that their job as a teacher is going to be so much easier, and it's going to be more effective, and the kids will be empowered. So I'm not saying get rid of the lecture-based learning, because nobody wants to get rid of that 100%, but how about cutting it back? So right now it's 100%, and if we cut it back to maybe 80% or 70%, then you're giving kids an opportunity to try things that they never have tried before. I mean, most kids don't try anything because they're never asked to try it. And so then they go out into the real world and they will go to work for a company, and people ask them to do things, well, like, oh my God, I never did. They told me what to do in school, how to get an A. But they didn't ever ask me to think, they just asked me to do what I was told. We need to change.
So essentially take the idea, whether it's mythical or not, from Google around 20% time, and apply it to reality-based learning in classrooms, and essentially say, just put aside an hour or so every day, or a day a week, however you choose to do it, whatever fits in your schedule, and let's make this roll. Make links to your community, set projects that work across discipline, that provide more depth to the thinking and the learning, provide more challenge to pupils for them to collaboratively then problem solve real life problems in their communities.
Yes, that's right. And then also this other mastery learning. Instead of forcing kids to constantly just get bad grades, one after another, how about letting them do this till they master it, until they get really good at it? Whatever it is, if they don't understand quadratic equations, so let's figure out what it'll take to get you to understand it, and you do them until you get it. And you don't just move to the next level and pray that somehow quadratic equations aren't necessary.
One of the things that I found really striking with Angela in taking her into English schools was she reminded me that if you're in a class of 5-year-olds and you said to the class, what are you all really good at? They'd all put up their hands and they'd all offer you a whole range of things that they think they're really good at, that they're genius at. And if you ask the same question to 10-year-olds, you'd be lucky to get half. If you ask the same question again to 14-year-olds, you might get one. If you ask that question to adults, you just get nothing. And as we get educated, we lose a sense of our own ability. And yet, I think we believe that every child has unique talent, has some kind of genius, and that we do need to harness that contribution, because the world's screwed up right now, and we need all those people to help us fix it.
Fantastic. You're absolutely right. We need more people that feel empowered and feel like they have something to contribute. And we don't. You're absolutely right about that. No one would put their hand up. And so those are my ideas for how to spread it. And also, it would be great to have a website. So more, support for a website, support. So this morning I got some ideas from the D School at Stanford, who is interested in helping. It'd be great to have, this is an incredible group of people. If we could get them to help support it, maybe it would spread, the way that it needs to spread.
Yeah. So I'm looking at 44 new chat messages.
44? Oh,
yeah.
Are you kidding?
5.
We should read them in order. And it's what I think I'll suggest for you two, because so engaging, is if people unmute themselves and then introduce themselves and then ask you their question live. I think that would be pretty cool to watch how the discussion unfolds there.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's cool.
Just need a taker first.
Okay, so I'll take it. So Jim and Esther, thanks very much for this. And Esther, I worked with you for many years, and I'm a great fan of what, actually, when I was at Stanford, it was more fun working with your students than working with people at Stanford sometimes, because, for them, everything is so busy and has to be so important.
But David, to some extent, that's the excitement of managing to harness the power of children, is that they don't want to put things off till tomorrow if they start to believe in it.
No.
If you connect with their passion and their sense of mission, they just want to get on with it, and they'll be imaginative and excited and excite you and make work and whatever you're doing with them an absolute joy.
So here's an idea, right? We start with learning, and then we come to learning by doing, but let's take that on to doing by learning. That you in school, somehow the learning itself is the aim, and I think that in life, learning becomes really fun when it is the process of doing something, and that's actually what Esther and Mark are doing. Something quite practical that I'd like to add to that is earning money. I never learned how to earn money in school. I've always been crappy at negotiating salaries or consulting fees or whatever. I think kids should learn that. And I think, you guys should, what about a school that actually puts together teams of kids and does stuff that earns money? and they can learn their own value. They can learn how to, relate to people so that people want to pay them for the value they create. And so I think that's very important in the world coming. And by the way, Esther, before I forget, these school guys, maybe they should come to our meeting in March.
Yeah.
Okay, that would be good. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I thought the D School with its international reputation could help us a lot.
Sure. Sign them up.
Yeah. So David, I agree with that. The one sort of caution I would give on that is there's a really interesting thing going on it started in Mexico with a franchise called Kidzania, and
Oh, yeah.
3/4 sized places around the world where kids go and check in. They the one in London has a British Airways sponsored check-in experience. They're given a wristlet so that if they try and leave the premises of Kidzania, an alarm goes off so they don't lose any kids. But happily, what they've done in London is that they've then recorded the occupational choices that these kids make. Because the other thing they get when they check in is they're given currency to spend in that world, which they quickly spend. And then in order to get more money, they have to get a job. And so in London, they're recording what the socioeconomic background is of the children who are coming through. Most come on school trips. So you get a really good mix, and the geography and the ethnicity and the gender, and then starting to see what kind of job choices they're making. And it's no surprise that it's an amazing and terrifying mirror back into our cultures around the poverty of ambition in disadvantaged children. And so alongside thinking about how we can help as part of this reality-based learning have children be able to start enterprise and make money, you've then got to think about how you raise the ambition and the aspiration of those that don't have much.
Perfect.
Yeah, well, so that is actually based on how you see yourself.
Yeah.
And those children in poverty see themselves as ending up in jobs that are going to perpetuate that poverty.
Yeah.
And so
and only if they live that long. Thanks to you, I had a chat a few months ago with Arnie Duncan, and one of the things he's now choosing to do is campaign around gun control, and that was inspired by a conversation he had in a school with a young teenager, and Arnie asked the cliched question about what do you want to do when you leave school, and he said, well, if I live that long, I'll do this.
yeah, isn't that terrible? It's just a tragedy, especially in Chicago, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't even know what to say about that.
Yeah.
So do we have another question or comment?
Anyone else want to open it up?
Yeah.
Cosmin?
Could I jump in?
Sure.
This is Pete Forsyth. I guess I hope it's not causing confusion that I'm dialed in because my internet connection is a little weird. So this is me.
Hey, Cosmin.
Okay. So I am really interested in. So my background in relation to education is mostly in having developed the Wikipedia education program. I created the pilot program that has now become a pretty extensive collection of projects at the university level in assigning Wikipedia writing to students. So, for instance, a student might write a Wikipedia article instead of writing a term paper. And something that I've always believed about this kind of work is that, well, the Wikimedia Foundation has really taken an interest in it as generating good content for Wikipedia. That's one of the main measures of success. But I believe that from an educational perspective, it's actually probably a lot more important to be doing this sort of thing at the junior high school or high school level, so that kids can be learning something about media literacy through their engagement, but through actually actively building something online and engaging with people all over the world or in other classrooms. It's certainly challenging for junior high or high school students to engage with Wikipedia, so you probably wouldn't want to have each kid going off and working on their own article. It might be more like a class project type of approach.
Right.
But I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts about how something like Wikipedia can, can be leveraged to meet the kind of goals that you're talking about, can be used as a tool to help teachers give their students meaningful work to do, project-based work to do, that they can actually take pride in beyond just what they accomplish in the classroom, and what kind of opportunities you might see with broad open platforms like Wikipedia, I guess, just to generalize it a little bit.
So I'll start. I think it's a fantastic idea. First of all, Wikipedia relates to the real world. And so kids would be connected with the real world. You could actually start them in middle school and have them come up with ideas for, like, what would be a good Wikipedia article? Why don't you check Wikipedia, see what there is already, and see if you can either come up with another article that you might want to write for Wikipedia, have the teacher edit it or something, or have a team of kids edit it. Or if you can't find another article that you want to write, how about what could you add to one of the articles that is already there? And just getting them to think about it and know about it and be involved would be huge. Because, as I mentioned, most kids are only worried about their test score and who they're friends with, these days, or, their pimple on their nose or something. So getting them outside of their, I guess, paranoia zone would be a really good thing. They're paranoid about all these different things. Help them to see that there's more to life than just worrying about the stuff that is just in their immediate environment. So I think that's a great idea, using Wikipedia. There should just be some support for teachers, just handout on how you can use it in grades 6, 7, and 8. Or you can, even little kids learning to read can at least know how to look at a Wikipedia article. So, grades 4, 5, 6 could, what can you find in Wikipedia today that you would like to share with your friend or your partner? I would just have them go on Wikipedia. And then when they get older, they can realize that they can actually contribute to Wikipedia. By the time they're in, I don't know, whatever, college or high school, they can actually write articles. I have my kids paying attention to this. Didn't think about it in a broad scope, but this is a great idea. Wikipedia it's great. And I'll have to go back and look more closely at what you've already done.
And the other thing that I really like about that, Cosmin, is relating it then to media literacy, and it's becoming now an urgent issue that we educate children to be able to differentiate between spoof, fake, and
for sure. What's real and what's not real. That would be fantastic.
Also what's spoof.
And could I break in on that point for just a moment?
Yeah.
One thing that I think is really overlooked about Wikipedia is how its entire production model is built around transparency. So imagine if your kids had the opportunity to take a field trip and sit in the newsroom at the New York Times and listen to editors arguing with each other about what should go into a story, or what angle they should take, or what subjects they should interview to write a story. That would be an incredible educational opportunity. That exists with every single Wikipedia article already online, if you know how to go and look at the view history screen and interpret what you're looking at, and the talk page. Without even participating yourself, you can see what it's like to participate. And I guess that's the thing that I see as having the real power at the levels where it might not yet be appropriate for kids to engage directly. There's still a ton that they can learn from just observing.
Right.
How about you suggest a workshop at the I4J Summit to work on this idea? Sounds like a cool idea to get hands on.
I would not just have a summit on Wikipedia. It would be like other ideas like Wikipedia. Yeah. Wikipedia could be the lead group, but other ideas for teachers to use that help them connect their classroom with the real world. What are some of the ways to do it? I've got a lot of ways to do it, but I'm just a journalism program, but maybe if you're a social studies class, English class, science class, there's a lot of ways to connect your program with the real world. And people just aren't doing it because they're so focused on the test.
Yeah. Okay, Ben.
So I think we had Cosmin, and then we had Mark, and then Shally.
Can I just say I'm sorry to cut you off, Lord Jim. I'd be very interested in hearing more if you want to contact me offline. I don't want to take up too much time with this, but I didn't mean to cut off your answer there.
Yeah, thanks, Cosmin. So Mark, before you go and fix your car, what have you got to say?
I think it was Cosmin first. That was Pete.
Oh, okay.
We got misordered. So Cosmin, go ahead, and then Mark, and then
Hi, Jim
Shally.
and Esther. This is Cosmin. That was Pete.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Pete.
Hi, Cosmin.
Hello,
Hi, how
Cosmin.
are you? So I have one observation and one question, or maybe two observations and two questions. So one of them has to do with what I noticed both growing up in Eastern Europe as well as living here for the past over 15 years, that kids are told to go towards jobs that pay. Anyway, in Eastern Europe was towards jobs that have status, right? So whatever, growing up, there was not that much money around, so status was the currency. So I don't know how we could resolve that. And the other thing that I also noticed, because of my bi or multiculturalism, is that not all the kids learn when they get individual attention. For example, my kid actually gets super inhibited when he gets individual attention because he feels singled out. So and by contrast, he learns amazingly when it's about togetherness and bringing things together as a class, not as a group of 2 or 3.
Yeah.
So that points out to the fact that, the way we view the world has to do with the way we learn. So if I view the world in a more individualist way, and I say that, not with a negative connotation, then that's how I learn better. If I view the world in a more together, so that points to what I call the cultural relationships, the way the values, beliefs, expectations we borrow from the environment in which we grow up, and then we transmit towards the way we learn about the world and the way we see the world.
So let me start, Esther, this time, and and goodbye, Steve. Two things. One is every one of us is different. It's a profound truth about humanity. And there's a great book by a Harvard academic called Todd Rose called The End of Average. And he talks about how, for understandable reasons, we have organized schooling around a fictional notion of an average pupil. And we standardize and we organize on that basis. And today we have the opportunity that we've never had before of genuinely starting to individualize education. And great teachers will always be able to recognize the individuality in the room, and that some will respond to different forms of pedagogy better than others, and that they will differentiate pedagogy as well as learning accordingly. But we will be able to give teachers the tools through the machine learning behind artificial intelligence and so on to really enhance their capacity and their ability of teachers. And that's hugely exciting and plays exactly to your point. And then the other point that you started with around people choosing careers on the basis of money or choosing careers on the basis of status.
Yes, because you said that we are losing the ability to get in touch with ourselves. And that's why. That's why we're losing, because the initial idea maybe wasn't seen as making enough money by my dad, my mom, or the society,
And all I would say is that there's another book that I really like called The 100-Year Life by a professor from the London Business School called Linda Grattan, and by an Oxford economist whose name escapes me. And
The 100-Year Life?
The 100-Year Life. And what they're saying is that a child born today in our countries will more than likely live to over 100. They won't be able to retire until their 80s. They'll therefore have a working life of 60 years. and they'll
Wow.
need to be more self-aware of the need to renew themselves during that very long life. They will obviously have to change careers many times, and they'll spend some periods where they're really hunkering down in order to acquire assets and to house themselves and to look after family, but they'll spend other periods of time renewing themselves, renewing their networks, renewing their education, and will need to be more self-aware around that. So I would suspect that we will get to a point where there'll be times when we'll choose to maximize income, there'll be times when we'll choose to maximize status, there'll be times when we choose to just go and travel or just go to a university for an oasis of calm and learning to recharge, whatever. But over such a long working life, it's as big a change in our thinking as that we attach to technology and globalization.
Thank you.
I think it's pretty interesting what you say, the 100-year life. So if we have all those people that live to be 100 years old, and then all the new babies that are born,
Yep.
we are going to have, especially if we have a technology-enhanced society, have to make sure that these people actually have jobs.
Yeah, so we need something, I don't know, should we call it Innovate for Jobs to try and answer that question for us?
Yes, Innovate for Jobs would be good. Yes.
All right, I think we have Mark up now. Thank you both. Can you unmute? I'll unmute Mark. Here we go.
Oh, okay. Hi, everybody. This is a great discussion. I want to pick up on what Jim just said about how we organized education. And I see one of the issues is that we've organized education almost entirely around thinking. And thinking is only one of the skills that kids need. They also need action. They also need relationships. And particularly, they need accomplishment. They need to be able to do that. And that's the tradition that's been always the tradition of business, whereas the academics was the tradition of school. And I think that speaks to the Wikipedia thing. That's a great idea. I love it, but it's really in the thinking realm. And so my question is there, I see the new ABCs, and I want to know what you think of this, of education and what we should teach kids, is accomplish in the real world, become a good, effective, world-improving person, and contribute to your community and the world, all while you're a student, not after you leave school. Accomplish, become, contribute. What do you think of that?
Esther, do you want to start? Or shall I?
Sorry about this. I'm going to try to...
Deal with your telecom. Mark, yes, I expect
Everybody's getting phone calls.
maybe they're
Me calling.
I just turned on my phone, and I'll just let it be offline. That's the best way.
Yeah. Mark, accomplish, absolutely. And I thought B might be build, but I guess build is also accomplish. But I like to think about words that make people think beyond the thinking side, because I think you're right that we have an education system that focuses too much on that and not enough on creating knowledge, creating artifact, creating and building stuff. But belonging and that sense of personal empowerment and the sense of contribution is completely right. If we can get that idea embedded, and that if the first step to be able to do that is this campaign around 20% time for reality-based, problem-based learning, then I think we would be making a really good start.
Thank you. Esther's unmuted. Can I add one? I'm going to add one more idea, if just to take a second more. But I love the 20% idea. It's a great way to get started, but it's not really measurable in terms of convincing people that one way is better than another. Another way to do this, perhaps, is to say, suppose we took a month of what we do now And then we took another month and we said, that's all going to be real world project based. We're going to do it totally differently. And then we went back and forth every month. That would give us the opportunity to conduct the experiment to say which the kids like better, which the teachers like better, which is more effective in producing certain results. I think we need to think about experiments because these days that's all people want to hear is data.
Yeah, I guess my only worry about that, Mark, is you've got to persuade some parents to let us experiment on their children. And you know, when I sat in the hot seat as a minister, it was always a stumbling block around innovation in education. There's a very low appetite for risk amongst parents and teachers around whether you try something new on that child.
And my answer to people who say don't experiment with my kid is, in this day and age, it would be irresponsible not to experiment because we don't know how to do it yet for the new world.
Sure, and that may work, but it feels to me like that I would prefer to build up an evaluation scheme for 20% time, and which I think is perfectly doable, and see how that works as the first step. And then maybe we build a consent around, say, well, let's do a semester of the new project reality-based approach to sit alongside 2 semesters of the old approach. You know, then we may be able to get into big chunks of time that you talk about.
Okay, just so we get to compare. But I agree. We'll continue offline. I'm going to have to go fix my car. Thank you all.
Thanks, Mark. I think we have Charlie there next, and then Tammy had a question. If you just unmute yourselves first.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
We can.
We can hear you. Yeah, we don't see you, but we can hear you.
That's okay. So I was thinking about how, first of all, about children that come from very different backgrounds and different needs. I've been working with kids who, you know, sleep 5 people in a garage. Their needs are obviously very different from the needs of kids who grow up in Palo Alto that come to school ready and with the internet in hand and all of that. So I think that it's such a complex problem of how to shape an education system that gives actually an answer to all the different kinds of populations that we have.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, even if the schools have a great system, maybe the kids go home and there's no food and the parents are, I don't know, something is terribly wrong. So the home environment is extremely important. So I think about parents' education as well.
Yeah.
And of course, the teachers' education of how to make them more into facilitators, I'd say, than teachers. It's not that they have to teach, they have to more to show kids how they can find their way, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great point. Esther, do you want to start, or should I just carry on?
Actually, I'll just say a few words. I think that the needs of all these kids are actually basically the same. They need to be feel good about themselves, and they need to have support. And the problem is, kids coming from this homes you described are not. Their parents need this kind of support, and they're not getting it. And so as a result, then the kids don't get it. So education, if we would be doing it right, would also be to support the parents, help the parents with the things that they need. I mean, instead of all the money we would be spending on a wall, we should be spending money to support these parents. So that's just a short answer to a very complicated question. Your turn, Jim.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, in the government that I was a part of, we had something called Every Child Matters in England.
Right.
And the sort of starting point of that was every child must feel safe. There's no way you're really going to be in an environment where you can learn anything positive if you don't feel safe and then healthy. And the way that we set about trying to do something about that was to work quite a lot with parents, particularly in disadvantaged areas. We had something called Sure Start, which was a program to support particularly mums from pregnancy all the way through to when their children started statutory state school. And that had pretty good outcomes. It wasn't perfect, it could always be better. But that points to the kind of thing you need in the sorts of communities you're talking about. I think Esther's right about parental engagement, but you also need a fairly active sense of public authority that will be active in just giving that child a sense of security so that they can then have a basic platform from which to progress.
Yeah.
And just to be conscious of
Thank
time,
you.
I think we have, sorry, Shelley. We have roughly 5 minutes left. So I think Tammy, your question is up, and then I'll just do a quick closeout.
Yeah, I'll make it pretty quick. Just to brush through some of the information. I've been mentoring for about 3 years. I'm currently working in the Oakland district or the Oakland community at the nonprofit, where we're trying to come up with more innovative ways to provide job training for the youth of color here. In Oakland, just to give you some statistics, we have a 35.5% dropout rate for the Oakland school district. And part of the reason is because they had required a lot of these students to pass this test before they graduate from high school. They found out that by the time they got out of high school, they weren't even able to write in full sentences. So that pretty much showed how the education system had somewhat failed a lot of the students, because a lot of students come to our center and they would be writing in all capital letters. And the reason is because they wouldn't be able to tell the difference of the capital and punctuations. And then, and what's fascinating is that it's kind of like starting all over, as if like they weren't really paying attention in school. The teachers or the students are probably really disengaged in school. And then they end up in our center where they're in a place where they really need a job. And they wait until the very last minute until, I'm out of the school system now, which is high school, or they went to prison or dropped out of high school and they need a solution to their problem. So we give them a second chance, even after they've been in prison or if they had records in their criminal backgrounds, to give them, provide them with job training. And even if this community college district here, the Peralta Community College, has a 50%, in California actually has a 50% retention rate. That means only half the students actually transfer into a four-year college. They end up in situations where they have to go straight to work, which is a pretty good solution because, I think that the community colleges don't really quite give you a real career pathway, even though just last year they started implementing that in the state of California. And I found it really interesting that, it's actually a good idea to starting a program where companies would take in interns from these communities to kind of give them a real world experience. And then that way they could at least have it in their resume. And if they don't have a 4-year degree, at least they could actually show their portfolio on their resume and then get referred to by the people that they work with. So My question is, do you have any maybe ideas of how I could start a program where I could roll up a bunch of companies to start accepting these interns from these community here in Oakland?
So I guess one of the things that I'm starting to get really interested in is how we move away from qualification as being a proxy for skill to being able to genuinely expose the skill and the contribution that people can make. Now, if we can achieve that, that pulls the rug from under our whole education system. But it's certainly true, I think, that the return on investment of higher education is getting more challenging. That many employers are now quite interested in sourcing talent earlier. And then if it becomes appropriate for them to get the learning from a college degree, then then they might help support individuals take that college degree. What we're doing here in the UK is we've introduced an apprenticeship levy on employers over a certain size to raise the money to rapidly expand our apprenticeship schemes here across a whole range of different occupations, including sort of new occupations as opposed to just the traditional sort of blue overalls and hairdressers type apprenticeships. And that kind of solution is the sort of thing that ought to be able to work for the people you're talking about in Oakland.
Yeah, I think what we're doing is we're hiring the instructors to train them, and once they get trained, then they would be able to start, moving into the next step with this, which is apprenticeship.
But sometimes you need to do an initial piece of work with individuals to make them, to deal with their emotional state so that they're then learner and work ready. That if they've got too much anger, if they've got too much emotional baggage, they need some work to just let go of that, to learn to control themselves, to have enough self-discipline to be able to do the learning and do the work.
Yeah, so I want to reiterate what Jim just said. I think the emotional component is really important, because without that emotional component, no matter how many skills they have, they aren't going to last in the job.
Yeah, we provide counseling as well.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. This is awesome. Thanks, Esther. Thanks, Jim. And I've really enjoyed this. Thank you, everybody, for participating as well. And I thought I'd just quickly sign off saying the next live Q&A. Whoop.
Could I just, before you sign off, could we just bring people's attention to the I4J Summit, 1st, 2nd of March. You go to bit.ly/I4J 2017 and you come to the site. And it's invitation only. I4Jers are invited, the ones who now are in the leadership forum. And if you have other people you think should come, get in touch with me. Ben, thanks for this extra minute at the end.
No problem. I just want to be able to sort of get toward the end. Just that was very important, though. So next up is Kat Keeley, Thursday, February 16th, same time, 10:30 Pacific, 1:30 Eastern. And please let me know if you are interested in presenting as well. So thanks again, Jim and Esther and David. Don't forget to sign up for the summit. Thank you both.
Okay.
Thank you. I loved it.
Thank you very much. It was great, Ben. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Esther. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Esther and Jim. You guys were amazing.
Thanks, Robin.
Thanks, Robin. Robin. Oh my God. So exciting. Oh God.